Germany finally, I have to say, has realized that space is not only something for science and development and exploration, but space is essential for our national security. So we actually, with that message, we catch up with our neighboring countries, especially our friends in France, who have considered space as being essential for their national security for many decades already. We report to the playing field as a new player, as a new significant player.
Hey Space Watchers, and welcome to this edition of Space Café Radio. Today, we take a deep dive into what may become the most significant transformation in Germany's space posture since reunification. The announcement by Defense Minister Boris Pistorius of 35 billion euros for German space defense by 2030. To unpack what this means in practice, I'm joined by Major General Michael Traut, commander of the German Space Command, the man tasked with turning political intent into operational capability. General Traut, thank you for joining us. So how do you and your team receive the minister's announcement at the BDI Space Congress?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for having me. Good morning. I'm absolutely glad to be with you again. And we live in absolutely exciting times. So we both witnessed the minister's announcement on the 25th of September. And if we remember how the audience reacted, some people call it an Apollo announcement or a Kennedy's announcement. And some people may have been really surprised on that. I have to admit, I wasn't quite so surprised. I was absolutely excited. For me and for us in the German Space Command and the Bundeswehr, of course, we do have a new amount of political backing right now for our activities, which we have been pursuing for quite a number of years already.
And did the number, the 35 billion, surprise you? Or was that the logical next step after the Zeitenwende in defense?
The number looks quite exciting as well and quite huge, absolutely. But if you sum up all the already running activities, all the running programs we are already prosecuting in and for our space capabilities, a good amount of that number is already included in those 35 billion. What I find personally quite exciting and surprising as well, that there is a kind of plus X additional to the existing and projected programs already. And I think we will talk about that in a minute.
Absolutely. So let's explore, though, how the Bundeswehr frames space defense. The minister said space is no longer a domain of science and visions alone. How does the German Space Command define defense in space today?
If you go back to our idea on the space domain and its defense, we've been talking about military means, on the one hand, protecting our own space capabilities, defensively, of course, protecting and defending our space capabilities, and on the other hand, is to be able to act actively in the space domain in a kind of tactical offensive. And of course, in the notion, let's say in terms of a deterrent, actually, to be able to tell a potential adversary, we would be able to mitigate or to annihilate your space capabilities as well. i.e., that means that we will acquire some offensive space capabilities. And I'm absolutely grateful to my minister, I have to say, that he officially announced that on a political stage.
Yeah. So what specific threat or threat guide does your planning include? Is it just the typical ones, so jamming, cyber attacks, kinetic assets, co-orbital maneuvers, or are there any others that you see already?
Since our impression of space systems is quite larger than only the space segments themselves, as we know, space systems consist of space segments, link segments, and ground segments. That's what you learn at the university. But we consider space systems as being quite larger. We include a transfer segment, which is the production, the terrestrial transportation of satellites and launchers and rockets to their launch pads, the launch and early orbit operations, the operation, the command and control of those satellites or of those systems. Then we include the space domain awareness element as well in our systemic view, because you need to know what's going on in the space domain on capabilities and intentions of your adversaries and, of course, of your own coalition partners. And last but not least, we include the users of space-based services in our system. And if you look at threats and opportunities to defend, or necessities to defend and opportunities to attack, you might see even an information operation that declines the trust of any societal audience in a space-based service. Imagine what would happen if people do not trust Google Maps anymore or any other space-based service. This might be included in our thoughts of defense and, of course, on the other side. Space defense and space threats may not physically address the classical elements of a technical space system, but it could go far beyond that. And our ideas and our operational thoughts, how we frame space operations, could include operations against or to protect some other elements of our very complex space systems.
As you just mentioned, the trustworthiness of data, images or so, there's this production chain from acquiring the signal, processing it in orbit, transferring it, and so on and so forth to the soldier on the field, in best case. So what is your responsibility in this chain, and how can that be protected to the end? Because the trustworthiness of data, especially in days of AI, is absolute question, and all the inter communities are talking about that at the moment.
Of course, there are a lot of links to the question of physical security. So we are thinking about a question of scenarios when operators of a satellite control center cannot get to their workplace anymore because there's a demonstration in front of the main gate. So that's a physical threat. And the second part of the game is, of course, the whole question of cybersecurity. Of course, we need to ensure that our data, all the data which are transmitted in such complex systems, are cyber secure. So we, of course, work together with our cybersecurity branches in the German Armed Forces as well to ensure that part of the game, but that's not the whole thing. So it's a combination of physical security and cyber security.
Oh no, I see the complexity. Let's have a look a bit on 35 billion is a lot of money, without any doubt. So what does it buy at the end? And you put an interesting relation on it earlier in the conversation that we worked on many of these projects already. And so it's just the logical step. So let's translate this policy into capabilities and unpack the architecture. What are the key capabilities where these funds will flow? So situational awareness, communication, you talked about physical security, early warning, launch access, and so on and so forth. Or is it all of the above?
Absolutely. There are already a number of programs already running. I would like to go into a capability level. We differentiate a little bit between functional capabilities and operational capabilities. And we have a different capability gap in those different areas. So I subsume functional capabilities as being satellite communication. So as we do already have some satellite communication capabilities, but we need to extend and renew them and build them on a different technological basis. I will come back to that later when we talk about the architecture. So SATCOM functional capability needs to be modernized and extended. Same applies to space-based reconnaissance or space-based intelligence. So we already do have some space-based reconnaissance platform, reconnaissance satellites working by radar and perhaps by optics as well. So we need to extend those capabilities and bring them into the future with programs like the SARA succession program, perhaps. And there are other programs where we want to extend our space-based reconnaissance programs, for instance, by signals intelligence from space. We only can do right now imagery intelligence from space. So what we want to do is to extend that into signal intelligence from space, i.e. detecting radio frequency emitters, terrestrial radio frequency emitters from space. So that's an extension of another functional capability. We still rely on other functional capabilities like weather, like geospatial information, like navigation, PNT, positioning, navigation, and timing from other, let's say, providers like GPS and Galileo. So we look more in that respect to enhancing and strengthening our ground segments like GPS or multifunctional PNT receivers, not only being able to work with GPS, but with other navigation systems as well. So these are the functional capabilities. On the other hand, and that's where we need to catch up even more, because we do not have those capabilities right now. We need to build up those capabilities, not only extending, but building up those capabilities partly from scratch. So that's number one. It's satellite-based missile detection. So it's early warning. That's part of a tactical process. If you look at our air defense efforts, which are on top of the priority list of my leadership, saying, okay, we need to be able and ready to defend ourselves not only against small-scale drones, but against ballistic missiles and hypersonic vehicles moving through the high atmosphere. We need to have a decent early warning and tactical queuing capability for our defense systems like Arrow. So we need to build up a satellite-based missile detection capabilities, not only being able to do some time-to-time reconnaissance, but to do surveillance. You need a permanent surveillance and a tactical kill chain of missile defense or hypersonic vehicle defense is a question of only a couple of minutes.
Isn't Odin's Eye?
Odin's Eye is a part of that, of course. There are already some activities going on the EU level, multinational level, of course, from our collaboration with our United States friends. We do have already some shared early warning information. However, this needs to be intensified, and we want to build up a German capability on that in order to contribute to a larger international framework. So that's satellite-based missile detection, part of a kill chain, a tactical kill chain. Secondly, active counter space is the second one. We do not have any capabilities so far in our defense posture. We want to become capable to do active counter space, reversible and non-reversible. And this extends from, let's say, easy low-level things like jammers, like dazzling lasers, like radar reconnaissance jammers, for instance, up to real physical objects like Inspector or Guardian satellites. The minister called it out like Wächter-Satelliten, Guardian satellites. So those small satellites we want to develop, and some prototyping projects are already on the way. Those satellites are meant to operate actively in space. And we envisage a large program, not only consisting of a small number of little satellites being launched perhaps in a very responsive and a very reactive way in terms of a couple of days or weeks, but it could extend the Gizmo program. The Gizmo is not a single satellite, it's a program. We envisage a series of Gizmo satellites or Gizmo platforms extending even up to a space tug in the geostationary orbit, doing things like the SJ-21 or the Luge Olymp satellites. Let's say we want to have a capability to have something out there as well, and being able to operate there actively and freely, and to do some things which other space actors have been doing for quite a while.
But just to clarify that, when you talk about offensive space capabilities, you're not talking about destructive ones to create space debris, because Germany, if I'm not mistaken, signs the ASA regulation. Even you have to follow that. So we talk about, let's call it on-orbit servicing,
on-orbit manipulation, on-orbit, let's say, maneuvering, inspecting. All those things are included, but I wouldn't exclude, I have to say, some non-reversible effects on other space platforms. That doesn't necessarily mean destructive, debris creating. Germany has committed itself not to do any direct ascent ASAT tests. So in a war, which I really want to prevent by a proper deterrence, in a war, I even wouldn't exclude that we, as a kind of last resort, go after destructive means to other satellites. But destruction does not quite mean the physical destruction of a platform. So the turn of a satellite into a cloud of debris, but a mission kill would be sufficient. So if a satellite can't do its mission anymore, it's out of the game.
One question about situational awareness, and you spoke about it at the beginning, because you need to see if you want to act. That's absolutely understandable. But will the question about also the lacking capabilities of EU SST, will Germany create its own catalog at the end of the day?
I guess a space catalog, as you perfectly know, is one of the most complex things we can do. So there are several actors creating space catalogs, EU, SST, our civilian partners of the German Space Agency, which I absolutely cherish that we have such a good collaboration with them. We contribute to the EU SST catalog from the military side as well, through the German Space Agency, through our Space Situational Awareness Center, which we run together. And of course, since we strive to extend our global sensor capabilities as well, there's already a quote in our national security strategy more than 2 years ago that we want to set up a global network of sensors with partners. So now with the 35 billion, we do have some more funds to do that. And there are some plans, of course, going on in buying and setting up more radar sensors, more telescopes with partners around the world. We will have a greater sensor base in creating own data, of course.
Will that be institutional sensors or commercial ones?
Both.
Okay.
Both, absolutely both. From the outset, we are not going to a single source or single system solution. What we want to do, and this increases our resilience as well, never put all your eggs in one basket. It's a very old military wisdom. What we want to do is to have a good mixture of reliable commercial data brought to us by reliable and, of course, certified commercial providers, some own sensors, which provides some additional data and complementary data to a larger catalog. And of course, the second thing is, well, in space, you have the same situation like in many other military domains. You will be only recognized as a serious and a reasonable partner if you bring something to the table. And we want to bring something more to the table. We already bring something to the table, but to my mind, it could be much more. And in terms of space domain awareness, not only by sensors, but the data processing capabilities, the analytical capabilities, we can do much more, and we will do much more with the resources we've got already. And the last thing I would like to mention, so that really made my day on the 25th of September at the end of the minister's speech, he said that we will have a military satellite control center in the German Space Command. He said that.
Why is that such a big thing?
By now, all our German military satellites are flown by contractors.
Okay.
We will build up a military satellite control capability. And if you look in the future on our space architecture, which we try to unpack a little bit, saying, okay, this architecture will consist of a multi-orbit, multifunctional, incremental architecture where we launch very quickly some small satellites serving a single one of the purposes, be it functional or operational purposes. By the way, there could be some satellites doing space-based space domain awareness as well. So what we see is that's not a big system, let's say, made by one standard. So it's an incremental architecture, a perfect new space approach, actually, that we step by step build up that architecture. So what we need to define are, of course, the interfaces, the ways how those satellites collaborate with each other, with their different missions. And the second thing is that we are extendable in a kind of rolling fleet approach, that we don't do it like we have been doing for decades in the past, building huge satellites with 10 years development times and all of that, and launching outdated technology in space 10 years after. So we want to have a very quick recurring rate of satellites, a perfect new space approach. And all of these satellites will either belong to the Bundeswehr or will be operated by the Bundeswehr. And therefore, I need a satellite control center, not only for the 8 or 10 satellites the Bundeswehr has right now, but for a 3-digit number of satellites in the future.
Talking about the big birds, Satcom BW3 or BW3 was just signed with Ariane Group to launch it on an Ariane 6, which I think is a great sign for European independence. How will that satellite be integrated into the architecture, or is it just an overlay because it's the old-fashioned GEO? It's still functional, no doubt, and it has its purpose. But will it be integrated? We talked about multi-orbit operations already.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, it will be integrated. It doesn't stand for itself alone. Of course, it will be an extension of our SATCOM capabilities and bring the GEO part of SATCOM into the coming future. But of course, it will be part of that new architecture as well. So we are talking about a multi-orbit, and including GEO, of course, a multi-orbit, multi-purpose architecture, which is developing itself step by step. And of course, the already long-term running projects, so like SATCOM Stage 3, will be included, will be thought with that. That doesn't mean that SATCOM Stage 4 will look the same. I'm pretty sure that SATCOM Stage 4 will be something completely different, but SATCOM Stage 4, since we are right now starting to discuss the system design of SATCOM Stage 4, we can build in the SATCOM Stage 4 interoperability to SATCOM Stage 3, of course.
Yeah, and I'm quite sure that capabilities like relay satellite capabilities or might be built in or not. But let's have a deeper dive as best as we can into the architecture. You spoke about small, agile, fast turnaround satellites for singular functions. So may it be ISR, might be communication, might be early warning. And there potentially then a fleet of each of them.
That's not necessarily so. We envisage that this constellation or that number of constellation, call it like you want. So it's a kind of an open system architecture where, well, if we come across a solution where somebody offers us a satellite which has both a kind of communication and infrared missile early warning defense capability and says that's technically no problem, we can provide that. So if we could integrate that in our system as well, could be nice. What I'm saying is that not every satellite of our future architecture will look the same. So that's not a constellation where all satellites can fulfill all functions. So there will be some specialization that's technically and technologically necessary as well. And I don't say as well that a single satellite does only serve a single purpose. So it can be a mixture of it based on future technologies we might explore in the next coming years. But the first and the most important things are the stepped approach. So we will build up capabilities step by step by using available, partly commercial off-the-shelf technology. Of course, taking risks in that way. But if we want to be quick, we need to take risks.
I was about to say, on one hand side, you want to go for a constellation. That means you want to use effects like effectiveness and mass production. Mass production for even, you spoke about 3 digits, break it down to the functionalities. Whatever, 50 to 60 satellites, it's not really mass production as we know. And if they all get their Sonderlocke, that's a good German word, then it is not this mass production anymore. So you ignore this process and the speed, what comes with that. So that will be interesting to see. Talking about the timeline between now and 2030, it's 5 years. It's not very long. What comes first and what is still conceptual at the end?
We are, as mentioned before, at a kind of different stages of capability development. If you look at the functional capabilities where we already do have something and we want to extend it, of course, there are low-hanging fruit, I would say, because first of all, SATCOM Stage 3 is already on the way. So we will have in due course an extension of that capability. And technology is already around on doing something like SATCOM from the low Earth orbit. There are many technologies around for doing space-based reconnaissance from low Earth orbit. If you look at companies running hundreds of satellites already, companies announcing building up a new satellite factory in Germany, other companies who were not well known for satellite productions announcing that they will enter satellite series production in Germany right now. So I'm pretty optimistic that we will be able to extend our functional capabilities quite quickly because the technology is there. On the other hand, I feel a sense of urgency in our operational capabilities. Because number one, we do not have something right now, so we need to build up something quickly. And secondly, the technology to build up operational capabilities like tactical kill chain against ballistic missiles from space and active counter space in space. Those are challenging technologies, both still. But I have to say, I'm pretty optimistic in that way as well, that we will make steps entering those capabilities very quickly. For instance, we are already exploring a very good infrared sensor from space. The Ernst Mach Institute is flying its prototype satellite with an infrared sensors in order to fly together some data from rocket launches from space. That's something we didn't have before. That's already on the way as a research project. So we collaborate with the Ernst Mach Institute as well. And secondly, I am pretty optimistic that the research part of the DLR already has a lot of technologies to conduct reconnaissance and proximity operations and to do satellite manipulation, because those projects have been existing in the past. Look at the DEOS mission, which was cancelled, and look at the robot arms we already have. Look at some companies providing world-class LiDAR sensors to other satellites, to other companies. So we do have that technology. And I think with the demonstrator programs, which are already on the way for two types of satellites, which are interestingly called Sword and Shield, run by the DLR, actually, run by the German Space Agency.
Who would come up with such a name?
Okay. I have to admit I'm partly guilty of that. My analogy to a Roman gladiator quite well. So those prototypes will be flying within 20 months, I would say, provided that our German micro-launchers come online pretty quickly, which I'm optimistic of as well. So this is a package where we get into our first step into that capability very quickly. And of course, 2030 is not the end of history. So the minister announced that we will spend 35 billion until 2030. We didn't announce what we will spend thereafter. So I think the program will continue after that.
Let's talk about the Achilles heel here, procurement and the industrial readiness. The money is only one side. From your point of view, is the German space industry ready to deliver at the pace you need? You mentioned already this, I would call it patchwork of innovation and research and so on. So they are good ingredients. Are you becoming the chef now?
I'm perfectly convinced that we do have a proper industrial base in Germany for that. So since our famous Zeitenwende has been now running for more than 3 years, and I think the messages coming from the national defense are pretty clear. The basic message is, well, forget about the old sense that we don't have money and a lot of time. Now we do have money and no time. This needs a complete change in culture. And the second thing is it needs to be not risk averse, but it needs a kind of risk management which is different from the times before. So everybody needs to be ready to take some risks. First of all, the official procurement organizations were so afraid of making a single mistake because they would be drawn to the court after a single mistake. That shouldn't be the case anymore. And secondly, of course, we already have been extending messages to our German space industries, to the primes, and of course to the new startups. But if you ask a founder of a startup company, are you ready to take risks? Well, he will laugh about you because he is taking huge risks in doing a startup company.
Yeah, but there's a different risk for him and for a country.
It's a commercial risk, of course. But on the other hand, we need to get into a culture of risk management versus a culture of risk avoidance.
Yeah.
So that's something I try to bring across strategically. And if we manage to do that, and I see some good signs, again, I see companies saying, okay, we want to set up some production lines of satellites in Germany. And some companies who haven't been famous to produce tanks and other vehicles before, and they want to enter space production and space technology. I see a very good industrial development in Germany. Thank you again for having me in this interview. Again, my message is our procurement systems, our official systems need to get into that pace and into that culture of risk management as well.
How can BNBW adapt their processes to achieve that?
I think there are many regulations already wide enough to use those, let's say, ranges of decision-making already. The old way of least resistance is not, let's say, the way doing it. So people do have already some ranges to, let's say, use their opportunities. But on the other hand, that's another message I try to bring across at all levels. I include myself in that as well. And I keep telling my own people, hey, if you take a risk, do it. I will not only say I want it, I will say, of course, if something goes wrong, I will take the responsibility as your boss. And I would really wish, that's one of my new Christmas wishes, I would really wish that leadership at all levels of our procurement and planning and our official agencies saying, okay, we are ready to take that risk because we see that mission that we need to get ready in a very short time.
You're talking about the human component in that, and I see that. When we have the conversation with people in BNBW, they say very clear, we are following the process that are given to us. We can't be that creative. So it's not the human, there's a human side on it, no doubt about it. And it's very easy to get yourself protected by a piece of paper and say, that's my rules. Mm-hmm. But will we see a hard reform of the procurement in the years to come?
This has been tried a couple of times already. There were secretaries of state coming from large consultant companies trying to reform our procurement. They didn't succeed in the past. But I still think our regulations already allow this. And it's more a cultural than a regulatory problem. Of course, there have been 2 legislations in the past. I can't tell it in English because the name is so really German. It's the Bundeswehr Planungs- und Beschaffungsbeschleunigungsgesetz, or the Bundeswehr Planning and Procurement Acceleration Law. Wow, yes. So there are steps in the right direction.
You get a lot of points on our Scrabble.
A Scrabble on that, absolutely. 40 points on Scrabble. These are steps in the right direction. But I think if everybody went into the regulations and explore their opportunities rather than taking the easiest way, we would already come many steps forward.
In the hope that we will overcome this procurement challenge. So can dual use and commercial shelf solutions really shorten the entire timeline or bring they also new risks? Risks that you are aware, but you can't avoid potentially. But again, it depends, as we just mentioned, on the level of risk and for whom.
Yes. Yes, of course. I'm absolutely into a good mixture of commercial off-the-shelf, buying satellite or buying space services from commercial providers into a mixture of dual use. A good example is if you look at the missile early warning, a satellite with an infrared sensor detecting missile or rocket launches is as well able to detect wildfires.
But not the other way around.
I don't know. Perhaps it could be. So there are many dual-use applications already in the world. And I think if we manage to bring down those stovepipe thinking of this is only a civilian solution and this is only a military solution, and we need to work together in military and civilian, official and commercial organizations, if we manage to work together more closely. And there's so good examples. For instance, Barbara Golf with their JCO initiative, where we are able to create space domain awareness information solely on commercially acquired data. And they are pretty nice, absolutely nice data. They're pretty close to the real truth and to the classified truth. So many good role models for us getting into that. And we are already in the conversation with our space industry and space-related industry, I have to say, on how we manage to get civilian commercial solutions into military and vice versa. So the dual-use factor is something. And of course, I'm pretty aware of the risks because these services and solutions are run by civilian employees of a civilian company. So we need to answer the question, what happens if they are declared to be a legitimate military target by the other side? Of course, but we are already on the way to clarify.
Passport is also a challenge in that context, I would say, because when I look into the German space industry, I would say maybe 60, maybe 70% of people don't hold a German passport in this industry.
As long as it's not a Russian or Chinese passport or a passport from other countries from the list of states of our intelligence service, I'm fine. EU passports are absolutely fine. And of course, we need to find a way, a good mixture of solutions. What types of services or what types of capabilities do we need to hold governmentally and officially? Where are we able to collaborate with our industry? So first of all, I come back to my newest hobby, a German military satellite control center. So we need that German military satellite control center because, first of all, we need to fly our Bundeswehr satellites in times of crisis and war by ourselves. And secondly, what happens if one of our contractors potentially is, for whatever reason, not able to do his or her job?
You touched on the dual-use nature of many of the technologies, and it also includes then research, of course. We need that research and innovation. And yes, we have in Germany these Forschungsvorbehalt, this resilience towards a specific research in a few universities. But do you foresee a dedicated dual-use research network or innovation fund for space security?
Well, to give you a short answer, I think the DLR is already the best example for it. The DLR is a research and technology organization which works for sovereign purposes, not only to support high-tech science, but to prosecute clearly military solutions or military-capable solutions. So the DLR has not any problem to work with us, and many universities are already rethinking their reluctance to work for defense. Some people do have a problem with military. So if you translate it into security and defense research, I think even more universities, I've been to Bavaria yesterday at another occasion and listened to the Prime Minister of Bavaria yesterday, and he was really proud of saying that in Bavaria, they don't have any reluctance in their academic or in their scientific environment to work for security and defense. And I think that's a good development.
Yeah, I think that the entire narrative of our understanding of space changes towards defense and security based on the current situation. So let's face it, we see it also with ESA and without having mentioned them before.
Peaceful use of space, actually. So the ESA is committed to serve the peaceful use of space. I do as well. I'm there to make sure that we can use space peacefully in the future in deterring some aggressions.
That is an ethical discussion, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Let's come back to the situation in Germany, the 35 billion. Also bring a very strong signal towards our European or international partners. So how can this investment reshape Europe's balance? So how will France, Italy, Poland view this very strong German pillar?
I think the first message behind it that Germany finally has realized that space is not only something for science and development and exploration and a nice scientific hobby, but space is essential for our national security. So we actually, with that message, we catch up with our neighboring countries, especially our friends in France, who have considered space as being essential for their national security for many decades already. So we catch up and we report to the playing field as a new player, and as a new significant player. Of course, wanting to collaborate, since we already do, with Olympic Defender, with CISPO, in NATO, with the European Union, the European External Action Service. Of course, we do have some good talks with ESA as well. So we report as a new player, having realized that space is essential part of our security and defense to the field. And I think our partners think positive about it, because space security and defense, let's say, the more players you have in your team, the better it is, and the greater the deterrent will be.
Space is a team sport.
Absolutely.
Who said that?
Quote, Stephen Whiting, my team captain, by the way, my Olympic Defender team captain.
I heard it from Salzman earlier this year,
yes.
But same team.
Stephen Whiting, he's a commander, US Space Command, and as such, he is my team captain.
I see. Okay.
Because, he's the captain of the Olympic Defender mission.
But When you spoke about the European landscape, so will that include also the data sharing? Because that's a critical issue in that situation.
Yes, absolutely. What we see is, of course, since space is so critical and so sensitive for national security, we will share whatever is possible, but there will be some parts of information and data which are kept under national authority as well. And data sharing, we do have already data sharing agreements for space situational awareness data with many partner countries. And of course, through our German Space Agency, we participate in EU SST as well, including 15 European countries.
Tech and money is not everything. Let's talk about the human side and the long-term perspective. You often speak about the people behind the systems, and you're very proud of your team, what I think is great leadership. So how is the Space Command preparing and training for this new area?
Mm-hmm. We made some pretty good steps forward. So first of all, we set up a special space career in the German Air Force last year already. I think we've been talking about it in Prague the other day as well. So this is developing quite well. Young people coming from high school, applying for that hugely attractive question of working in the space arena and joining the military, doing something for your country and for your defense. We offer them a career as a space specialist, going to university, studying aerospace engineering or mathematical engineering or other technical or engineer sciences. And we already promised them that they will find a post in German Space Command afterwards. In parallel, since these people are undergoing their university and they will be ready in 3 to 4 years' time only, so we recruit people from all parts of the German armed forces and even from the outside. And I can say there are more applicants than we have posts. I don't have any problem to find bright, young, motivated, excited people to do that exciting job. And it's great to see. So we are growing and growing. I will need some more, let's say less than 100, but more than 50, something like that, people to set up my satellite control center. So I envisage that Space Command will grow by approximately 3-digit number by the next couple of years, fulfilling those new tasks like satellite control, like extending our operational decks, extending our space domain awareness, other things like liaison organizations and so on. Space Command will grow a lot, and when our first sensors and effectors will come online, some people must operate them as well. So we will have another extension of space-related personnel in our forces. And of course, I'm absolutely proud of those people. We still have a kind of startup culture in our command, so people work more or less day and night to make things happen, but the motivation is absolutely high.
Fast forward. What will success look like in 2030? When would you say personally we are ready in space?
Oh, what would success look like in 2030? We have successfully extended our functional capabilities. We have successfully found a first step into the door of operational capabilities, but we won't be ready in 2030. Again, the program will continue. It will not be ending in 2030. So we will grow our operational capabilities step by step in the coming years. And I think fully operational Space Command will be fully operational when we do have a set of sensors and a set of counter space capabilities that we already can do something. Not doing nothing, but do something. The full range of operational capabilities, I think, with a gizmo, 1 or 2 perhaps, or 3, don't talk about numbers, geostationary orbit working gizmos, that this will take a little bit longer. But the most important thing is that we get into the first step into those capabilities. And that will be my measure of success by 2030.
General Traut, thank you very much for these insights. And I know you have to go to your next appointment. And we overstretched our 25 minutes podcast, but it's always a pleasure to talk with you and understand where you and your operational team will go. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you like these or other episodes of Space Café Radio, leave us a rating on your preferred podcast platform. It is the currency of today. And if you want to stay on the pulse of the space industry, please visit our website at www.SpaceWatch.Global and subscribe to our newsletters. And of course, don't forget to become a Space Watcher. I'm Torsten Kriening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, your independent perspective on space.